Today in Math 10C, we're looking at the last topic in Chapter 3, and that's 3.8 on factoring difference of squares and factoring by grouping. So let's start again with our factor tree and just keep going. Again, just to review quickly, to factor first, we always try to remove a greatest common factor, and then we can look at using the sum product method if it was an easy one to do with just an x squared out front. Or we can factor using the decomposition method if it was something like 3x squared plus 16x plus 5. That's where we had to find two numbers that multiplied together to give me the product of the first and last term and add up to the middle term. In this case would have been 1 and 15, so we had to decompose the 16x to give us 1x plus 15x, and then from there we ended up factoring it by grouping. And that takes us to where we're going to start today. Factoring by grouping. If we're given four terms, the only way you can factor it is if you can factor it by grouping. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to start with what we just did. 3x squared plus x plus 15x plus 5. Whenever you're given four terms, look and see if you can remove a greatest common factor from the first two, which we can, and that's an x. We're left with x times 3x plus 1. See if you can remove a greatest common factor from the second two. We can. That's 5. So that would be 5 times 3x plus 1. And then you can factor a 3x plus 1 from both terms to get 3x plus 1 times what's left over on the outside, which is x plus 5. We'll do a few more on the inside, but just go moving on now to factoring two terms. When we're factoring when it has two terms, the only way we can do that is if it's a difference of squares. An example of that would be x squared minus 16. Never plus, always minus. When it's a difference of squares, there's two terms there, but really there's three terms. The middle term is actually 0. It's really x squared plus 0x minus 16. And what we're doing is we're looking to see if we can factor something where two numbers are going to multiply together to give us negative 16, but they're going to add up to 0. And those are going to be positive 4 and negative 4. So it's going to be x times x is x squared, the first term. And in the second term, we're going to have the square root of the 16 as positive 4 and minus 4. So let's move on into it as we go through here. So here we go. The first one we just did, or a similar one we just did, x squared minus 25. That's really x squared plus 0x minus 25, which can factor into x plus 5 and x minus 5. In a squared minus 100, if we can look at this and say, can I find the square root of a squared? Yes. Can I find the square root of 100? Yes. It's going to be a plus 10 times a minus 10. Again, look for two terms. This time, it's a little bit more complicated. 16t squared. But if I can't factor out a greatest common factor, can I find the square root of 16t squared? Yes, that would be 4t times 4t. So that would go in the first bracket. And plus 7s and plus 7s would go in the second bracket. Now, jumping ahead a little bit, you can see that we can factor a 2 out of the next. So always look and see if you can remove a greatest common factor. In this case, we can. So we're going to get 2 times a squared minus 25. And again, that's going to become 2 times a plus 5 times a minus 5. On our third one, 1 minus k squared. Well, the square root of 1 we can find, the square root of k squared we can find, so one of them is going to be 1 plus k, and the other one's going to become 1 minus k. On our next one, we can factor out a greatest common factor. This time it's going to be 3 and an x, so I can divide both of these by 3x. That's going to leave me with 3x times an x squared minus 9. And that means that I can factor 3x times x plus 3 times x minus 3. And we're done. In the last one, something a little different here again. This time I can factor out a 2. That leaves me with z to the fourth minus 81. Now I can find the square root of both of these terms, so I can write this as 2 times z squared plus 9 times z squared minus 9. However, notice that z squared minus 9 is again by itself a difference of squares. So I can further factor this, and that tells me that I'm going to get 2 times z squared plus 9 times z plus 3 times z minus 3. Let's move on to the bottom. Factor by grouping. This will only occur when you have 4 terms. You take the greatest common factor out of the first 2 terms. Here we're going to factor out an x to get x plus 2 and a 6 out of the next ones, and we're going to be left with x plus 2. So in the final form, it's going to be x plus 2 times x plus 6. Again, in the next one, factor an a out of the first 2, factor a negative 5 out of the second 2, and you have an a minus 9 in common to both, and I got a minus 9 times a minus 5. Jumping ahead a little bit here, we got x out of the first 2, factoring, so that leaves us with x times x minus 15 minus 4 times x minus 15, and that's x minus 15 times x minus 4. In the last one, again, look and see what you can take out. We can factor in x out of the first 2 terms, x times 5x plus 2, and I can factor a negative 5 out of the second 2, and that's going to be 5x plus 2 times x minus 5. There you go. Your assignment is to do worksheet 3.6, numbers 13 to 24, and then I want you to go on and do page 195 of your textbook, numbers 10 to 18.